You deserved everything you got. This is a union city.
That is a Philadelphia tradition.
Seize the means of podcasting.
Oh, God, the bosses crushed us.
Let me tell you one thing else.
In oldie-timey times.
Who said it? Kanye West or Thomas
We
Paine?
will not raw dog reality for that one.
The pleasure of the flesh is in solidarity.
The Scab Buster.
It's going to be wholly unprofessional.
Keep together strong. Let that be your mantra. A cheery topic. The Reading Railroad Massacre. Start with the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad. It was founded in 1833. And basically its goal was to haul anthracite coal from the mid-state to Philadelphia. And so it expanded throughout the 19th century, bought up a lot of coal fields, bought up a lot more train lines, and a lot of shipping and warehouses in the city. So if you needed to buy coal anywhere around the eastern half of Pennsylvania, you were giving money to...
But they offered coal at 2-day shipping.
Oh, yeah.
Primordial shipping.
Also, the P&R line got so big in large part because the government was literally just giving it free land. Now it's the 1870s, and the P&R line was led by a guy by the name of Franklin B. Gowan.
Gabe, I know about this gentleman.
In addition to his fights with the Molly Maguires, he used... it was kind of red baiting. He used fears of the Molly Maguires to break up another group called the Working Man's Benevolent Association.
Okay. Oh.
Which was basically an early miners' union. The WBA, or the WUMBA, went on strike in 1875, and Gowan basically destroyed them, which is a shame. So after Gowan crushed the
Women's and Men's Basketball Association.
Yes.
They were ahead of their time.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking about when basketball was created, weren't you?
I am.
I know you.
That's not something I thought to look up.
Because it has nothing to do with the story, Gabe.
Not at all.
You don't have to know everything, okay?
But there's research to be done. Gowan and the Pennsylvania and Reading Railroad, because they owned both the rail lines and all the coal fields, they had to fight unions on two fronts. Yeah. So they had just crushed all the coal miners, and now they were looking at the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen.
You can do that one for me, Gabe.
I was going to go with BLET, which is less fun.
Okay.
But they abbreviated it as BLE.
The Blee?
Or the bleh.
You keep that O in there in the beginning.
Oh, so the bowl.
The bowl.
Or the bolet.
Or the bolet.
So the bolet, or the...
Bolet.
Bolet. The Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen was founded in 1863, and it was basically a one of the unions for railway workers.
Not for long.
Yeah.
My boy
actually,
Gowan's
no,
on it.
It still exists.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Gowan. What happened, buddy?
Yeah.
What happened? You're slipping.
It was also considered to be one of the less militant ones. Like, they were willing to...
Well, that's why they survived.
Yeah. They were willing to negotiate. They were willing to sign contracts. So now the conditions that led up to the strike, which led to the massacre.
We're getting to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So after the Civil War, there was a pretty bad depression that started in 1873. This one was caused, at least in the U.S., mostly by railroad speculation. So there was a bubble around railroad investment, and then the bubble popped, and then everyone lost a lot of money, and there was a run on the banks, and a bunch of banks closed. Then for the next 4 years, all the poor people started dying.
Oh.
It's also worth noting that this was the Today we call it the Long Depression from 1873 to 1877. At the time, it was actually called the Great Depression.
Oh.
Until the 1930s when they're like, oh no, this is much worse. So now we're going to get back to Bollé, the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers. They had seen pay cuts even before the Depression started. Then in 1876, they took another 10% cut to their wages. Basically, they were not doing very well. And there were people were getting kind of desperate.
The Bollé won't stand for that.
Exactly. In May of 1877, they went on strike for a restoration of their wages. So they weren't even demanding a raise. They weren't demanding better conditions or anything. And then Gowan basically replaced them almost immediately with scabs.
Yeah, that's the Gowan I knew and loved.
Oh, yeah. Some retained their jobs, but after returning to work, most of them, no one got paid since the strike. That strike was in May of 1877. Then afterwards, Gowan's manager, John...
Gowan had a manager?
No, this is the manager that worked for Gowan. Sorry.
Told you he needed bra M&M's.
Yeah, so John Wooten issued an ultimatum to all of the workers in Reading, saying, "It has been deemed unadvisable to retain in the employment of this company anyone who is a member of that organization," referring to Bollé.
The Bollé.
With all of that going on, there was the Great Strikes of 1877 started erupting all around the country. Starting in West Virginia along the Baltimore and Ohio Railway on July 16th, when workers went on strike in a rail yard. And then you started to see railway workers going on strike all across the country pretty quickly. In Reading, they assumed everyone was basically too poor to strike. There's also some evidence that there were racial tensions between the workers, and that was getting in the way of calling a strike, that there wasn't enough solidarity going on, or enough solidarity for them to feel comfortable striking. So all of that is the situation we're in. Then that Friday, the mayor left for summer vacation.
Okay. Okay.
The next day, after the mayor left on Friday the 20th, on the 21st, the next day, the Pennsylvania and Reading Railroad opened their pay offices and gave out the back pay that they owed all of their workers. It's unclear as to why they did this. It might have been to calm tensions and try and win back some support, but it probably actually ended up backfiring, because now the workers had enough money in their pocket that they could afford to go on strike. A lot of these guys had been living on debt since May, and now they had a little bit of cash that they could actually use to survive for another couple weeks, or at least pay off their debtors, and then take out more loans if they went back on strike. The next day, Sunday, July 22nd, or the night between the 21st and the 22nd, violence broke out. A car of shingles, so these are cedar shingles for roofing, were set ablaze, and about 2,000 people stormed the rail depot, burning more cars and cabooses. The state had been preparing for some kind of uprising after seeing what was happening in West Virginia, and they had already started to call up the state militia to assemble in Harrisburg. The strikers and rioters knew that they had to keep the state militia from getting too organized, because then they would come in and basically crush them. So they set fire to all the rail bridges. They also started cutting telegraph lines and basically disrupting any communication into and out of the town. So this really quickly turned from a strike over pay and conditions and a small riot that was targeting company property to looking a lot more like a small revolution or insurrection happening in Reading. It's also important to note that because of the Pennsylvania and Reading Railroad, or the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad, Reading itself was a major hub for rail traffic. So basically, most of the rail traffic in the region had to go through Reading to get to Philly, to get to all of the ports. So those rail lines being shut down meant the company was going to start losing money really quickly. By 4:30 p.m. on the 23rd, they started blocking trains, pulling up rails. They were stopping train cars. And actually, because the guys who were going on strike were all trained railway operators and engineers, they knew how to jump on these cars and stop them as quickly as possible. So they were jumping on trains that were moving slowly and putting the brakes on and just stopping them in their tracks. So they were trying to block the rail as effectively as possible. So while all of this was happening, James Wooten, who was the manager that Gowan had put in place of the Reading Depot, had called in the state militia and the National Guard to help. In addition to that, that's how you speak English, he also deployed the Philadelphia and Reading Coal and Iron Police, who were basically his company gun thugs. And he was basically just trying anything to regain control of the situation. State militia arrived from Allentown, and it was the 4th Regiment of State Militia came in from Allentown. And when they got there, they couldn't find any police or civic officials or anyone to report to. So they went directly to James Wooten and basically just became more company gun thugs. They were taking their orders directly from the company. They were sent out to rescue a passenger train, which had been stopped by the rioters. And at this point, I say rioters because while it was technically a strike, it had become much more than a strike.
Yeah.
The 4th Regiment marched out, and unprompted, the troops opened fire on the crowd. The crowd then responded with pistol fire and threw stones at them.
Yeah, that'll work.
So the crowd, after a brief little skirmish, dispersed. And somewhere between 10 and 16 civilians were killed, and between 37 and 50 were injured, and 31 troops suffered injuries severe enough to not report for duty the next day. So the riots continued overnight, but there was no further bloodshed. They were mostly just destroying property. And then by the next morning, news of the massacre had spread to the entire town, and everyone turned against the troops.
Yeah.
Because they just killed 16 people.
Yeah.
So the Reading Daily Eagle described the massacre as the streets being literally baptized in blood. On their front page, they said, "It was the old story of military interference and military blunder over again. Blunder whose absolute law is and has been for all time, that the innocent are shot and the guilty escape. All last night the city has been in a state of anarchy and riot. At this writing, no can rightly anticipate the end." I think no one can rightly anticipate the end. So then the riots continued into onto July 24th. And the local police force, the troops from the 4th Regiment, company police, and also some armed citizens came out to attempt to maintain some kind of order. They weren't very successful. Then they called in reinforcements from the 16th Regiment, which was coming up from Conshohocken.
Oh, a bunch of Kanchi boys?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
So it's also worth noting that the officers of the 16th warned them that a lot of their men sympathized with the rioters.
Yeah, there we go.
And so the 16th showed up, and they went out patrolling with the men of the 4th. And then they encountered a group of rioters, and the 4th raised their guns and were about to open fire on them again. The 16th started shouting at them, saying that if you fired on them, we're going to shoot you.
Oh my god.
And this wasn't...
Yes!
Yeah. And this wasn't just the men of the 16th. Their colonel said it as well.
Kanchi for the win.
Yeah.
There you go.
So then after that little confrontation, some of the men from the 16th threw their rifles down and started handing their ammunition over to the rioters.
Wow. Oh my god. Yeah, baby.
And there were a lot of accounts throughout the 24th of men of the 16th basically just going out and drinking in public with the rioters.
Oh shit, these are Kanchi boys.
Yeah, these are Kanchi boys. So the reinforcements didn't work. Then both militia regiments eventually, or on the 25th, or at the end of the 24th, were marched out of the town by separate routes, because they recognized at this point that both regiments were just about ready to kill each other. And as the 16th was marched out, all of the citizens of the town came out and were cheering them. So then General Bolton, who was he had a general from the Pennsylvania National Guard who had finally got there to try and organize the whole defense of the town, requested that the 4th Regiment return to the city, because when he got there, it was basically completely abandoned, except for like a couple company gun thugs.
Okay.
But the officers from the 4th responded saying that the men completely refused to go back into that town, and actually said that they would, rather than march back into Reading, they will walk all the way home to Allentown.
Really?
So that didn't work.
Yeah.
And General Bolton was basically just kind of left without any troops to command. Then finally, federal troops were sent in, and it was 300 troops from an artillery company in Philadelphia got sent in. And basically bringing cannons in was enough to scare the rioters into stopping. Yeah. The company had won, but most of the rioters actually got off with really light sentences.
What, did they like storm the Capitol or something?
Yeah. And this is like, the union was basically arguing that their strike got usurped, or at least from my understanding of it, the union was arguing that their strike had gotten usurped by outside influences.
Oh, yeah.
The ringleaders got slightly more severe punishments, but for the 1870s, if they didn't, like, they got a trial, which was getting off easy. So, weirdly, the only person that was found at fault for shooting a group of civilians in cold blood was the sheriff, who I don't know if he was present for the action, but he got blamed for it. None of the men from the 4th who actually did the shooting got tried. Then afterwards, 4 companies of the 16th Regiment of Pennsylvania Militia were disbanded because they realized, hey, maybe we shouldn't give a bunch of Kanchi boys guns. Maybe that was a bad decision.
Well, they gave him up pretty easily, though.
Yeah. So that was the Reading Railroad Massacre of 1877.